Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 136th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Today, our panel will discuss immigration policy as favored by the left and the right. Immigration reform has been on the agenda of at least the last 6 presidents, and they have all said they wanted to do something to prevent illegal immigration. So far, the left and the right have been unable to agree on a plan. Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. On his left is Jerry Ritzman, co-founder of Ritzman Pharmacies. On his left is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and member of the Wadsworth City Council. And on her left is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. Ron, as you know, presidents from both the left and the right have spoken out during their campaigns about the need to curtail immigration, illegal immigration. It's important, illegal immigration. Yet the current president has faced stiff opposition on nearly every effort to do something about it. Why do you suppose that is?
I really wonder about that. I mean, after all, here's a man who was elected by states who had a lot of electoral college votes, and he just wants to make America great again, so why should we not follow him? Well, I think the left is kind of opposed to that, and I can give you a couple of reasons for that. He tells so many lies, it's hard to know what he really wants or what he means. And I found a couple of points recently. I don't know if we can believe these. They're from one of those fake news organizations, the New York Times. Recently, he claimed that 500 serious criminals are in the migrant caravan. There may well be some, but that's unknown. That's no evidence for that. 3 border agents were badly injured in the fake. No, that's no injuries among border agents. That was false. My wall stopped the migrants. There was a big thing in San Isidro where a bunch of people stormed the border. Well, doesn't have a wall. He's rebuilding some old sections, as other presidents have done. The migrants were stopped by a combination of pepper spray, tear gas, which is another controversy, and just sheer manpower. He says fake news ignores the crimes committed by immigrants. Well, that's an exaggeration. Overall, there's no evidence that foreign nationals or immigrants commit more crimes than Americans.
You're given a lot of reasons to not like Donald Trump.
I do have a lot of reasons to not like Donald
Trump.
I have reasons to.
But we're talking about immigration.
I think that, well, this is why, you asked me why we don't just go along, with the plans. And these are some of the reasons. Okay. These are some of the reasons. I won't go into the rest of these, but...
we don't go along with the plans because he tells lies.
No, that's not the entire reason.
Okay.
I think there's 2 aspects of things that are being considered here. One is the legality, and the other is compassion. Mm-hmm. I think there's got to be a way to somehow, even though folks may be here illegally, some folks have been here for a long time, have families, have businesses. We're beginning to deport these folks. Now, I agree. Like most people, you got to have laws. You got to have the rule of law. But there's got to be some way of helping accommodate this. It's not just the dreamers, not just the folks who were born here of illegal parents or nominally citizens of our country since they were born here. Not just those, but folks that are go into sanctuary in the churches because they're family people and they're going to be deported. There are occasions, all the things all the time. There's got to be some way to do that. I don't know what that is exactly. It's difficult to get a green card. The recent proposed regulation is going to make it more difficult. Yes. We had a pastor a couple of years ago. She was from Canada, Canadian national, and we helped her get a green card. It was costly. Mm-hmm. It was quite costly and took about a year. So that's tough to do, and maybe someone who's come in illegally and is working in the fields for $1.50 an hour can't really afford to go get a green card.
Yeah.
But so there's got to be some way, and I don't know what it is. I don't really know what it is. I think we have to get serious about talking about it. We have to get serious about trying to be compassionate. It's not just a Republican-Democrat thing. The bleeding heart liberals and the dollar sign Republicans at odds with each other. You know, there's got to be some. There's got to be some common ground.
We're going to have to redefine civility.
Well, maybe so, but you know, I get incensed about stuff, as do you, as do you, and so my mouth runs a little higher my brain.
Well, let me just ask you this before we move
Sure.
on to Jerry. Do you think there should be any kind of a process to control the people who come into this country?
Yes, of course, and the immigration and
You don't agree with John Kerry that we should have open borders?
not completely. No, I think we should have open borders to those folks who are legitimately seeking asylum and come in and apply for that and get investigated as to what their reasons are. That's being made more and more difficult, and that's wrong.
Yeah, and you're right. The proposal that the Homeland Security put forth in September it would make it more difficult for even legal immigrants in this to get a green card. I think that
My son had a situation many years ago, and he lived in Hollywood at the time, and he was driving his brother's car, and a car came out of nowhere, T-boned him. 4 fellas of Latino origin got out of the car and ran away. So, you know, they didn't stay around for the police to come investigate. So it does happen.
Jerry, you've got some interesting thoughts.
Well, I don't know if I do, but the one word that Ron used, which I think is important in this whole thing, is compassion. I mean, we've got folks in Central America or other countries who look at the U.S. and realize something that we don't a lot of times, is how inordinately rich our country is, materially rich. And it's going to draw them here. They're going to take risks to do that. And so we've got to figure a way to do it. And the United States is not the only country that's going through this. You look at all the European countries with immigrants coming from Eastern Europe and how they're resisted in Central and Western Europe, and particularly Great Britain. So we're not alone in this. I think that the Bracero program, which was a agricultural work program that was during or after World War II, and it has been patched together and fixed so many times. It's like a roof that has never had it torn down to the bare roof and reshingled and made good again.
What is that, Bracero?
Bracero, I think that's Spanish for work with the arms or something like that. I mean, they tried to, they've patched that and repatched it and redone it.
But this is a program that enables people to legally come to
Right,
the country on
yeah.
work
Migrant
permit.
workers.
Yeah, migrant workers. And I know they even tried in the 60s, mid-60s, they had a program called the A-Team, where they had athletes, and I don't know what the team meant, but it was for 17-year-olds to work in the fields because they were having trouble getting enough workers in Texas and Arizona and so forth. They had about 30,000 sign up, maybe about, 17 or 18,000 sign up. Only about 3,000 ever got out to work, and most of those quit because it was too hard to work.
Yeah.
But the legislature has kicked this ball down the road so far, and it turns it over to the courts, who end up almost having to make policy and law because the legislatures, the Congress is not doing anything. They're avoiding their responsibility. And until people like me and all of us here start to put some pressure on our representatives and senators, I don't think anything's going to be done.
Do you even think that would have any kind of positive
I don't know,
impact at
John.
all?
I don't know, but I guess I'd feel better about myself if I did call them up and say, hey, what are you doing? What's going on? Instead of being silent.
Patty, do you think if you called Mr. Bernese, he would do something about the border?
I'm not sure he's going to have the ability since he's out of office in a couple of weeks, so that I'm not sure that would work. I do think in cases it does help to call your elected officials. If they have enough calls, that's their voting constituency, they will listen to them, hopefully. So, it's interesting because when you look at the immigration situation, I keep hearing that Democrats want open borders and Republicans don't want anybody, and I don't think most Democrats want open borders. I really don't. I think, like Ron already stated, that he's for, common sense ways to handle illegal immigration.
I think that came from a speech that John Kerry gave a few years back when he talked about that being the ultimate.
And, that's one person who's really not,
Yeah, I know.
Affecting anything.
That's all it takes to start a rumor.
Exactly. And if you listen to most politicians now, they do want something. I think the question is, what way do we approach it? Is the best, most efficient way to stop illegal immigration building this giant $20 billion wall? Or is it perhaps by, I know one of the suggestions was to place more courts and judges on the borders. Mm-hmm. One of the big concerns is this catch and release problem, that when people come and apply for amnesty, they're examined, they're taken to court, and then they have to be released to come back 3 months later because there simply aren't enough courts to handle it. I know that idea has been thrown out that we need to, instead of bringing 5,500 military forces to the border, perhaps what we need to bring are more judges to the border and court systems to make that system work more efficiently. My biggest concern is the fact that present administration is looking to cut down on the number of the immigrants that have a asylum claim, allowing them to come in. And I'm not sure that that's the humanitarian way to handle things, by saying, okay, they're automatically all, not going to be granted asylum, and okay, if, there might be one terrorist in the group, so just, forget everybody else. I know that the claim has been made that most of the people that are coming are just looking for a better economy. And, and Jerry, you mentioned the conditions, and you spent time there in these Central American countries coming here. The problem is if you are a family there and you have children, and you know that if you stay there, you can't provide economically for your child may end up being killed, or you may end up being killed by the government, by some rogue group, that your child may become and lured to belong to a gang because that's the only way to survive. You're going to want to leave that. Now, maybe that doesn't qualify for asylum, but I think it should have some consideration. The idea is, we're okay with immigration as long as you do it legally. It is extremely expensive and extremely time-consuming in order to go through the legal process of immigration. And that mother, that father, who's looking at their 3 children or 4 children or 2 children and saying, I don't have the money and I don't have the years to wait in order to get my children out of this situation.
So it goes beyond being able to just prove that you are not a public charge, or that you're going to be on the welfare rolls once you're here.
I think so. and I think, many of those people will, they will work. And, and the point is, too, they will work the jobs that, many of the immigrants will work the jobs that American citizens do not work. Mm-hmm. But we have gone so overboard on this that we want to, birthright, if you're born here, you're a citizen. We want to get rid of that. Mm-hmm. I know last year when...
When you say we, you're not talking about Democrats, are you? That want to get rid of... Pardon me?
Whoever proposed it.
Whoever proposed it, yes, exactly.
Well,
That's a
Republican idea.
It's a Republican idea.
Let me ask you this, and I'm going to ask Bryan the same question. To what extent do you think that Democrats are resisting any initiative on the part of the Trump administration just because they don't want him to have a victory?
I think that there are those that are doing that, and to say otherwise would be totally disingenuous. However, I think the majority are actually looking at what they think would be the best. I remember last year when the issue with DACA came up, and in my opinion, Trump took away the DACA rights so he would have a leverage tool that he could go in and say, now I'll give this back to you if you give me my wall.
Yeah.
Huge fight in the Senate over this. And Trump not only wanted his wall, but there were, I think, 4 items, one of which was ending chain migration, and I can't at this time recall the others. Schumer went to him and said—
the catch and release thing.
Catch and release, and it was something else too. Schumer went to him and said, listen, we'll give you your wall. You reinstate DACA, and we'll let it go at that, then we'll address these other issues. Trump said, no, it's my way or the highway. I want all these things, or I'm not going to agree. And when we're at a point that there is no compromise, when there's no discussion, then, and this is what's happened over the years, then we get nothing accomplished.
Yeah. Bryan, I'm going to start off with the question I said I was going to ask you. To what extent do you think the Democrats are just digging their heels in to not give Trump victory?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the big problems that we're facing today. We had the same issue when Mr. Obama was in office. The DACA was not law. It was an executive order that he sort of dreamed up himself to put a little stopgap, a little Band-Aid on a very large problem. And if Mr. Trump decides to negotiate in public by, demanding a wall, I look at it sort of, making sausage. He's negotiating. He's trying to get what he feels his base wants. It's interesting to point out that Mr. Obama deported more people than the previous 2 administrations combined.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yes. This is not a problem that any one particular party has complete ownership of. There was nary a peep during 8 years of Mr. Obama's administration when his government, his administration was doing almost the same exact things that Mr. Trump has basically been doing.
The exception is separating families at the border.
To a certain degree. To a certain degree.
Well,
There were hundreds
because
of
the
thousands.
problem that exists is that the process that's in place has to determine if those children actually belong to those people.
Yeah.
There is a serious human trafficking issue that we have. We just had, if you follow the news in the paper, there was a home here in Wadsworth that was kind of I guess you could call it a way station for illegals. They found 20 people that were sort of here without their consent, if you will. They were told one thing. They were going to find them jobs and all that kind of stuff, and then they got here, they find out that they're sort of indentured servants. Now that's a term that goes way back, but basically you're here.
Sort of agreed to it.
Right.
Yeah. So when the media turns their white hot spotlight on these particular issues, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help the problem, and I would agree. Congress has not done their job. They've pushed it into the executive and judicial branches, and they've tried, the executive branches tried to do things, aka Mr. Obama and Dreamers and all that kind of stuff. And, the courts have tried and weighed in on certain things, but Congress, both parties, have to step up and say, what's going to work? I agree, there has to be a pathway for people that have lived here, that have raised their families here, that have overstayed their visas. There's more of those people. That's how they're
Right, that's
considered
one of the big
illegal.
problems.
They come here legally,
Student visas a lot
right?
of times.
They come
yeah.
here legally. They overstay their visa, and they're basically considered here illegally. So there has to be a pathway. Everybody, they want to throw around amnesty. Why don't you just give them amnesty? My feeling would be, I would put this on the table, is that if you have an individual, he's served in the military, he or she has served in the military for 8 years, that counts. They have a job, that counts. There's no criminal record, that counts.
Right.
They're productive citizens, that counts. That gets you all these points so that you can sit down in 6 months, 8 months, take the test, and have citizenship. What's wrong with that, But you have people that are stuck on this idea that we have to send them to the back of the line. We have to send them out of the country to start the process. That doesn't work. That's a non-starter for me. Okay,
That's the compassion
that
thing.
doesn't. Yeah,
We've got
Yeah.
an interesting statistic on that.
that doesn't. That to me doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Hard
And
for
that
me
has
to-
been
hard-
policy for years.
It has been
That's what
and
they
see
do.
that I think that's a great point. That has been the policy for years. It's not a Trump problem. It is our immigration policy that creates these vortexes that people get stuck in, and there's no way to get out unless they get kicked out of the country. We had a sad case here of a young man that was here.
Yes, I had him.
You probably had him in
I knew
school.
him from school, yes.
And he was murdered when he went
He
back
was
to
got
Brazil.
sent
was
within
that?
less than a year.
He never spoke the language.
He didn't
never.
speak Spanish.
He
had
wasn't- he
been
wasn't-
brought here when he was a baby.
Yeah,
He
and
was adopted.
exactly, and because of some sort of paperwork.
No, he got caught selling drugs, I believe.
Yeah, it was a drug offense, but
Yeah.
it was a minor
Right.
Yeah.
drug
Right.
offense, and they immediately shipped him out.
Shipped him out. So I think there's plenty of room if both parties would get together and say, listen, we have a problem. We have a problem.
That's the key, both
Right.
parties getting
Both
together.
parties need to get together and
They're
say
just
we
not
have a
going to do
problem. And it doesn't help the situation when you have particular cities that say we're sanctuary. We're not going to allow anything to happen. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't flout the law or flaunt the law of what worked for current administrations and say, well, because of a certain person is in office, we're just going to ignore the law. That to me is a non-starter. Okay, so there are solutions. I think there's plenty of compassion. I think we're probably one of the most compassionate countries along the lines of this folks that were coming up through Honduras. I just read an article that basically said a subgroup of these people, they're willing to go back if the United States gives them each $50,000.
I just heard that.
For what are they? What are they?
Travel expenses. basically.
Reparations. Reparations. They want reparations because, for whatever reason, if you give us $50,000 now.
And I wonder how many are actually
Right.
doing that.
Right. Exactly. And then when you see these pictures, the Obama administration used tear gas multiple times, but no one. I mean, that was a non-event. There was a young man that was shot. There was nobody hears about him. But because of Mr. Trump, who's in office, decides that the Border Patrol is going to do exactly their procedure, all of a sudden he's the bad guy, and we're gassing people.
Well, I think in
gassing
all
people.
And
fairness,
actually, it's
that
pepper spray.
the
And-
right
pepper
has
spray or-
really drawn attention to that. I mean, look at all of the publicity before the midterm elections. I mean, they had right-wing reporters embedded with them, following them all the way. They're 1,000 miles away.
I need to correct Patty. CNN had reporters embedded with them.
And so did Fox.
And Fox might have had a couple,
No,
but
no,
the
they
fact
did
is,
too.
when
They
you-
all
when you-
did.
When you looked at the picture of that family, that news that they were trying to generate with the mom, holding her 3 kids, and there was smoke in the background. When you expanded the picture, there are people standing around with their hands in their pockets.
That was somebody described that as looking through a drinking straw into outer space.
Exactly, exactly. So a combination of media focus, Trump derangement syndrome, and
I hate that term.
this notion that somehow,
Let's subscribe to that.
we're not a compassionate country, and all of a sudden now we have this.
Well, we're not. Look at all the homeless veterans we've got in this country that we're not doing much to help.
You know, the sad thing is it all comes down to money. If you're wealthy enough, you can get citizenship. You can come over here and you can walk into the country. You can get that citizenship immediately.
Can you really?
Oh gosh, yeah.
I'd be interested in knowing how much it actually really costs. And that might be a part of the equation.
That is part of the equation.
If you
It's
say,
expensive.
hey, listen, you've been working here, instead of it costing you $1,000, your points, you can accumulate them towards, and it's going to cost you $150 processing fee.
And that's a good idea.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, there's plenty of ways, but I think we focus on these little stress points. It makes great news when your border patrol or your guy's got a gun shoved in somebody's face. That makes great news, but that doesn't happen that often.
Do you think the U.S. military should be on the border right now?
No.
I was just curious.
No, I don't.
Not passing judgment, I just wondered.
I'm going to jump in here, and all these problems, we're fighting against, it's almost like fighting against gravity. It's almost like fighting a river flowing to the ocean, is that as long as there is that push economically from, let's say, Central American countries, as long as there are corrupt governments there,
right.
people are going to come this
Yes.
way, just like rain's going to fall from the sky.
Like Cuba.
It's
Look how many
gonna-
people have come from
It's
Cuba.
going to happen. And so is there any way to get to the root of the problem, and that's the corrupt governments and the lawlessness in those countries that the people, a lot of them are fleeing that.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's
We have the capacity in some cases to modify the behavior of other countries with economic sanctions. But what do we do about Honduras, El Salvador? Do we have the power to change the behavior of those governments?
This latest example shows that when those people came through, if half of the story is true, the Mexican government offered them places to live and almost a pathway
Asylum there.
a pathway for them to become Mexican. I would think it would be a lot easier for someone to assimilate from Honduras to a country where they speak the same language or close to maybe a different dialect of Spanish. But they turned it down. They didn't want to work in Mexico. They wanted to come to the United States. So I think there's got to be ways to encourage governments.
I'd still have to maintain that Trump is part of the problem here. The statements he says, he said that, ICE is tracking down dangerous criminals, and that's partly true.
Well,
but I have statistics from 2017. Now let me quote them. 2017.
Well, we're out of time, but you can do that. I promise
I want to tell
you.
you. It was just interesting, I thought. Small fraction of that. In 2017, there were 181,000 arrests by the Immigration Service. 17% were targeted criminals, and 2% were gang members. The rest were administrative, as you say, that kind of thing. Send them out of the country in order to get them back.
Okay, well, John, we're done. Thanks.